Hello and welcome. I'm Ty, and this is the Schooner Pod, brought to you by the Pigskin Podcast Network, a department of Omaze Media Labs. We here at the Schooner Pod would like to thank our sponsors at DraftKings for making this episode possible, and then, of course, our tremendous fans. Tonight, I'm going to be joined by the Schooner Pod's resident pirate, Boatin Blake. We will be sailing out to the Atlantic coast, a place known for piracy back in the day, if you guys know your history. And we're in search of some juicy gambling booty. So thanks for joining me tonight, Blake.
Thank you, Ty. As always, what a great introduction. I love when Ty gets the hosting duties. We saw his chops on I guess it was the March Madness one, with some good one-liners here and there, and now Bobby is somehow giving us the keys to the ship. But I'm excited to talk some ACC football. I know it's an area you know well, and a conference that was really wacky and weird last year that we got Pitt, out of all teams, to win the conference, and Clemson not being in the conference title game. So I'm excited to talk about this conference. I was excited to talk about Big Ten. Big Ten was pretty straight shooter. Ohio State's probably going to win it. We got a lot of different angles that we can cover.
I think there's definitely a lot in store. But before we get started, Blake, little surprise for you. I have unilaterally decided to give you a promotion within the Schooner Pod from captain. As we all know, you are a captain of gambling, Captain Boatin Blake, and I will be promoting you right now to Commodore of Covers, which is above captain. So without further ado, let me just read your promotion here. To all who shall see these presents greetings. Know ye that reposing special trust and confidence in the fidelity and gambling abilities of Boatin Blake, I do appoint thee a Commodore of Covers. And we actually have an official promotion warrant here. You can see it is signed by, I'll let you read who that's signed by for the podcast listeners.
Bobby's gonna blur it out probably. So
yeah, Bobby's very excited right now. So Blake is now a Commodore and shall be addressed as such. So with that being said, before we roll in, this is a gambling podcast as part of the weekend spread, as what we like to call it during the season. So this is the preseason of the weekend spread. And we do want to say that down in the description of this, we got some help links. If you have a gambling problem, please seek some help for that, because we don't want this to get in the way of real life. But without further ado, let's roll right in. So right at the start, we're going to start with what everyone is sort of on their mind. And I think it might be a little bit more up in the air, or just a little bit murkier than people would expect. Who are we thinking are the prime contenders? I know a lot of people would say prime contender singular, but we don't know.
Yes, so when I'm breaking this down, I'm looking at 4 different teams. I got to think of 2 from the Atlantic Conference, 2 from the Coastal Conference. I know conferences are probably not going to be or divisions are in a conference are not going to be a thing in a few years, but I still like the weirdness that it brings the title game. So we'll first look at probably the most prominent one when you think of it. That's the Atlantic. That's with Clemson. They're the odds-on favorite. Over at DraftKings, they're 120 to win the ACC as a whole. You have to give money to the book. That is heavily juiced. And look, Ty, this Clemson squad's going to be good. If you look at their offense, they're bringing back 9 starters. They bring back basically every key lineman. But, beyond those starters, this was a very underwhelming team on offense last year. I don't know how good that is. Right now, DJU is the presumed starter, and we saw him last year, and my goodness, it was horrible. It was a horrible sight to watch. Really, Clemson's defense was holding the line the entire time, and their offense couldn't score points. They had chances to beat Georgia if they would have just scored a single touchdown. They would have had chances to beat NC State. They would have had chances to beat, I'm forgetting who else but they lost 3 games in conference, which is just nothing you would think of from a Clemson team. And so DJU's the guy, but they got Clay Klubnik behind him, who's a 5-star. They got another guy named Hunter Johnson, who's a Northwestern transfer. So I like what they have on the defensive side of the ball. Their offensive pieces are good, but they have no quarterback. So people are going to just slam Clemson because they think it's a Dabo team, but get them out of here. I don't want anything to do with this team this year.
For sure. And we would be remiss to mention, as an OU podcast, that they obviously lost their defensive coordinator, Brent Venerables, as Bobby would say, to come be our head coach here at OU. So, like you pointed out, this was a team that really rode on their defense last year, and that's what sort of carried them through with a very, very flat, very disappointing, very uncharacteristic offense for them. And you mentioned specifically, DJU, their quarterback. He's rough for me because I don't know that I'm convinced that he's a flop just yet. That might be a pretty cold take, but he's a blue chip guy coming in, and I just feel like I'm worried that if I bet against him, something's going to click for him and he's going to meet expectations, because that's always possible at the college level, especially at this sort of formative time. So yeah, Clemson is a tricky one for sure. I think by far they are definitely the expectant winners, and we've heard the same old story from a lot of these other teams that we're about to mention within the conference, and they never seem to materialize either. So but yeah, important point too, like you mentioned, one possession game that they lost against the national champions as well. That was very early in the season, but yeah, this Clemson team, even with a disappointing quarterback, very flat offense last year, and complete, a lot of turnover on the defensive side. Who knows? I think that's going to be the story of this entire conference as we continue to roll through, is just who knows, really.
Yeah, because there's so many question marks when you look at all the main contenders and even some of the midfield in this conference. That Clemson, it's like, yes, they beat up on all the bad teams, but they lost to NC State, Pittsburgh, and Georgia, like the three teams that were either equal to them or better than them last year. And Dabo having to basically build an entire new coaching staff, which was the bright spot of Clemson. Like, Tony Elliott also left to go to Virginia, I believe, and that's a huge thing. Like, Dabo, for the longest time, he was taking less money in order to have his coaching staff be paid a boatload, making them some of the highest paid coordinators in the nation, and that continuity was why they were so successful. And so, in the first year where we're coming back with an unexciting quarterback, but solid pieces around him and a new coaching staff, like, I'm not laying that 120 right there. Like, I need plus money to back Clemson, and I can't trust them going into this year.
Yeah, and as we continue to roll down the list, again, we're using DraftKings, our wonderful sponsor, their odds. Some of the other guys up at the top, some of the other teams at the top, just sort of Miami, Pittsburgh, NC State, who I think, not to jump ahead of the wagon here, but I think they might be riding some hype from last year, and who knows, that one might burn some people. And then North Carolina as well, sort of rounding out the top there. Again, a lot of turnover at quarterback there, and some other stuff. So who really knows? I know I'm excited as we continue to dive in to talk about Miami more, because I think that there's a lot of hype and a lot of typical Miami situations that are about to play out. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so Miami is kind of, like, in my mind, the favorite coming out of the other division of the Coastal, and they have Tyler Van Dyke, and if I understand, if people didn't watch a lot of Miami games last year, they were pretty uninspiring. They came in with De'Aaron King. The De'Aaron King experiment did not work. That man collected, like, millions of dollars of NIL money and just never did anything for Miami. I know he got injured and dealt with some injuries, yada, 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 but just, like, never did crap for them. So Miami has become kind of that 7-5 team, but this year they get Mario Cristobal and Tyler Van Dyke, who I think has, like, the potential to be the best quarterback in the ACC. Even you could make the argument he's 1 or 2 right now, even, like, though we haven't seen him in a full season. But the thing that worries me about their team is their offense, and Tyler Van Dyke's good, but they lost a lot of pieces when it came to wide receiver from last year, and they're bringing in kind of some unknowns and projects. I know one from Maryland and some others, but every model I've looked at, though, has had a significant hike in points just because they hope some of these projects hits. Tyler Van Dyke hits as probably the best quarterback in the ACC. So I like them in the Coastal, but, like, there's many years I've said I like Miami to make the ACC championship game, and I'll see, like, UVA or, like, some other random school on the other side come out of it just because that division is typically a mess.
Absolutely. I'm known to refer to Miami for several reasons, and I hope a lot of people agree with me with this analogy. I'm known to refer to Miami as the USC of the East. And I say that without the typical OU malice towards USC right now, but just traditionally had a really good run at one point, a school that has outlandish resources and similar sort of recruiting advantages when it comes to hotbed of a place that produces a lot of people, and then also just a place that people want to live, especially if you're a guy with NIL potential to make really good money. If I were a 18, 19-year-old making $1 million a year, I would probably seriously consider going to the University of Miami as well. So Mario Cristobal, obviously coming over from Oregon, where he won 2 Pac-12 championships, and high expectations at Miami. Cristobal, for those that don't know, played at Miami during his college time. I think late 80s to early 90s, so sort of back when they were more relevant. And personally, I don't know if a lot of OU fans would agree with me, but I would love to. I know they were sort of the Darth Vader of the 80s for OU, but I would love to see Miami sort of make it back a little bit and be relevant. They have a neat history, and they're the ones that I don't want to say I'm rooting for them, but I think they're my juiciest favorite to win, if I do have to say so, because the odds are better, being not the expected ones, and they're sort of riding that wave that generally helps an up and coming team like Miami.
Yeah, and like we could easily get to the end of the season and Miami had like a solid, like maybe like an 8-4, and the signs are pointing up. Like Mario Cristobal, his main thing is he's an elite recruiter. Like I wouldn't say he's an elite X's and O's coach like we saw at Oregon. Like he just drops dumb games sometimes. Like he will beat Ohio State, but he'll just drop the random, like when Stanford comes to town, like he'll drop against that. So it's like Miami wants immediate results, and that's not the way in which they're going to get Miami back. It's going to be through Mario Cristobal's elite recruiting for 2-3 years to finally build out a roster that kind of looks like the Miami to what we're used to. But like even then, it's like with elite quarterback talent, that's always going to keep you in the hunt. So I think they'll be there in the end. But like it wouldn't be surprising to me if they're 8-4 and just like had a solid season, but we didn't get to see that like elite competing for an ACC championship team yet.
For sure. And as we move on, I think that's a very realistic, very, I don't want to say optimistic because it sounds like they can't do it, but I think that's a very realistic, very good sort of mile marker for that team to be at. So who knows? Again, who knows? I think that's going to be the catchphrase of this podcast as we roll through. Blake, when you continue to look at those other top teams, from both divisions, I guess I kind of threw out our let's start with the one division first. But who else jumps out at you? Obviously, we have the defending champs up there as well.
Yes, so those are the last 2 teams that I kind of highlighted, and the first one that I am slamming, I am finding any conference odds, any odds to win the division, NC State. This, I could be buying the hype. Like, last year I came out on our gambling pod, I gave out over 7.5 wins, that cashed immediately, and I knew this team was something different, but this year they are basically returning everybody. They're bringing back Devin Leary, who, besides Tyler Van Dyke, I think is one of the top quarterbacks in the ACC. And they lose their top 2 rushers, but besides that, they keep their entire wide receiving core. They keep most of their line. They didn't go to Clemson, but Clemson came into their house. They finally got over that hump and beat them. And I just feel like this team is the best NC State team we've seen since the Phillip Rivers era. And I'm worried though. Like I'm like slamming them right now, but NC State, like let's be honest here, they're a cursed school. Like nothing good ever happens to NC State fans. We've seen it with baseball, with COVID and their run getting set short. I feel like I see it every football season. It's like they are the perpetual like 8-4 team. It's like NC State will never bottom out, but they'll never be elite. So it like worries me that I'm feeling so high on them. But for some, I've seen them to win the conference at. What does DraftKings have it at now?
Somewhere around 1,100.
Yeah, or plus 800, and like I think that's great. And then if you can find even to win their division, I'm seeing about plus 500, where compared to Clemson is minus 220. You're basically like, I'm getting plus 500 odds for them to go into Clemson's house and beat them, which is great value, I think. And it could, if we see a lackluster Clemson offense like last year and improved with a veteran quarterback that probably going to be a good NFL guy one day in Devin Leary. Give me that value all day long. I love the Wolfpack this year.
Yeah, the big thing, and I think this is weird, and it's not necessarily even gambling insights, but I love for NC State specifically, not even to be necessarily competitive. Blake, do we have the same cup right now?
Oh, no. It looks similar. Oh, mine's Yeti.
Oh,
I
okay,
think we're slightly different, but
yeah. Anyways, NC State, I love their schedule. They start out at East Carolina, which is like an hour drive, I guess. And then they play like an FCS school, Charleston Southern. Then they have Texas Tech coming in there. And when you mentioned NC State being a team that sort of, even when they're up, nothing ever goes right for them, I immediately thought, oh, they're exactly like a Texas Tech. Thinking back to, what was it, like 07, 08 Texas Tech, where they just had the greatest Texas Tech team ever fielded, and OU had Sam Bradford, and Texas had Colt McCoy, and Mac Brown doing good, and it's just no matter how good they are, they're just never able to punch out the, I guess in their terms, Clemson, and then potentially right now even UNC. But they got Texas Tech coming in, they're playing UConn, who sad Huskies always. They got to go to Clemson, and then they have to go to Syracuse. But other than that, they're pretty much playing at home like the entire time. Like Greenville, South Carolina, right by where they are. They're at home, they're at home, they're at home, they're at home. They go to Clemson, South Carolina, which is, again, no more than 2 hours away. They got to go to Syracuse. And then that is pretty much, I guess Louisville is kind of a drive. And then their only other away game is at UNC, which is like 20 minutes away. They basically play at home the entire time. So if they have a run, this is going to be the year for NC State fans.
I agree. And like they were so close last year to making the championship game. And like that's just typical NC State though. Like that's just typical NC State, like fumble the bag at the end, and this could be basically be burning money, but at that value, I love that analysis. They're just keeping it close to home. And plus 500, I just feel like not necessarily a coin flip, but I think a competitive game between NC State Clemson, you're taking plus 500 every single day of the week. So,
yeah, I love that. And again, it's a who knows thing, because I am very concerned. My main concern with NC State is that a lot of this is based on last year's Clemson win. And if Clemson comes in and puts things together, especially on offense, and just blows out NC State or just wins even by double digits, I'm concerned that NC State suffers from that sort of not necessarily small market, but small market, smaller brand. You have to be zero defect. You, of course, and I'm not trying to stir the pot, but this as a TCU fan, like there is same loss to the same team, same circumstances. And for Clemson or Oklahoma or Texas or whatever bigger brand, it's going to be excusable when other teams are sort of held to a different standard. It's just the nature of the beast. So that's a big thing that concerns me about NC State. But like you said, returning pretty much everyone, that's a big advantage. So who knows? That's the ACC motto. So anyways, I think we sort of discussed the most interesting team. Do you have anyone else for sort of a most interesting? I know it kind of blends between our favorites and the most interesting, are sort of one and the same.
Yeah. So like I'll throw out two right here really quick. First, I think you just have to bring up Pitt, because Pitt's the reigning ACC champion, but we didn't really we won't get to see that version of Pitt ever again, because, as y'all know, Kenny Pickett has now been drafted into the NFL to the Steelers, and Jordan Addison got basically bagged away by Lincoln Riley and got thrown in a bag and shipped over to Southern California. So they bring back everybody besides those two pieces, but those were like two huge pieces. But in kind of a weird swapsy trade, they get Keaton Slovis from USC, who I thought was a pretty good quarterback. Like, he's not going to be
Mhm.
what Kenny Pickett was last year. But I'm just curious to see, like, if they're bringing back everybody besides those two guys, where they stand. And they lost their offensive coordinator to Nebraska, which was a pretty baffling move. Why you would want to go take a job on the Titanic right before it's about to head out. But that's for Mark Whipple to decide. But I just think they're going to be interesting. Like, they have a great defense, should be solid offense, easily can compete in the Coastal. It wouldn't surprise me if they're back in the championship. And then I have to mention this one just because Bobby might kill us if we don't. If we do an entire ACC podcast without mentioning this team, it's Wake Forest. I know Bobby has an affinity for this team. Sam Hartman's a fun quarterback to watch. It's a fun system, but damn, like, can they not stop the ball? Like, last year, Army put, like, a 50 burger on them, and you know how Army moves. They're slow, methodical, and Army putting up 50 points on anybody is pretty stunning. So this team's going to score probably 40, 50 points a game, but they're also going to allow that amount. So every game's fun with them. Every game's interesting. No matter how bad the team they're going up against, like, they're playing, it's going to be an offensive shootout. Like, Wake Forest just wants the ball at the end of the day. They want that final possession to win the game, and that's kind of a fun brand of football to watch. But I don't see, like, Wake Forest competing for the actual championship or anything like that.
For sure. And I think you bring up a good point, and this sort of really segues us really well into what we're going to talk about next. But I love those type of games that you just mentioned, especially because I'm an OU fan and a Navy fan, and that's pretty much it. So when I watch the rest of college football, I can't get into, Clemson going and blowing someone out, or Bama going and blowing someone out, or whatever else. I want to see those scrappy, just mud fights of games. It doesn't matter to me if they're not necessarily the flashiest teams or whatever else. If we got a game that's going down to the last drive or whatever else, and I see that little notification, scrolling along the bottom of my TV or coming up on my phone, or someone starts texting about it, I'm tuning in and I'm loving it. And I love watching that kind of football, and hopefully a lot of our viewers will agree with me. I love that kind of football where it's just like, I don't care who wins. I'm sort of rooting for both teams, and I just want to see good football being played. And you bring up a good point with Wake Forest and the ACC as a whole. A lot of teams. I like watching Florida State sometimes for some of that as well. And even some of the UNC, we kind of glossed over them. But UNC with Mac Brown, it's sort of like a house money fun. I just love any sort of tiny bit of success that he has. I love it because it's, you can kind of wave it against Texas. I loved him going there and being successful, but he's just, out there having fun, and you can see it. So that is, if there is one selling point for the ACC, it's that. And I think we'd be remiss to mention, as we continue to roll on, there is a potential that a lot of these teams are possibly looking for the way out, might even already be discussing that and in discussions, and we're seeing a lot of motivation here beyond just winning the conference. I don't think we're going to see anyone in the ACC that is saying, oh, we're out of competition, let's do this and this. Everyone is going to be fighting every single game, I think, or I hope, because I think a lot of these people are looking at, let's write our resume, because I know that it's the elephant in the room. We got to touch on it. But the SEC and the Big Ten are looking at people. That the ACC keeps saying that they're looking at Notre Dame, which might save them as a conference. But I think they might be too far gone. And Clemson, Miami has been mentioned a lot in terms of being interesting for the SEC. Florida would obviously be a big hurdle there. Florida State and UNC as well, also getting a ton of interest from the SEC. And then a lot of these other teams would also be Virginia Tech, could go. I could see them going to the Big Ten. I could see them going to the SEC, either one. Duke potentially has a decent fan base, really good academics, really good basketball. Could be a Big Ten move. You never know. So I think a lot of these teams might be fighting for more than just the ACC championship. They might be fighting for those exit opportunities as well.
I agree. There's so much at play this year, and that's why this conference is going to be so much fun, because I think with the coupling of the realignment stuff, it's like some of these Florida schools, Miami and Florida State, we're getting an insane recruiting battle in that state between Miami, Florida, and Florida State now, that Mike Norvell, when he took the job at Florida State, probably thought it was going to be a little bit easier, but now you got two of the best recruiters in the nation going up against you, so every win truly matters. Like, Mike Norvell's not going to be there much longer if he's going 6-6 and losing recruits to Jackson State, okay? Like, that's not going to fly. So I think there's some also interesting storylines there that even if take the conference realignment out of it, like, there's some big recruiting battles versus some of the SEC schools and Big Ten schools that are really fascinating. That's why, like, this conference is so weird, and, like, that's why I think it's going to be very thoroughly enjoyable this year.
For sure. I totally agree. I think it's going to be good football. So with that being said, and that's a perfect juicy appetizer for what we're about to dive into, what is your must-see game? And to be more specific, we're talking about the one that's going to be good competition, good football here. So sort of the brand names, we're going to get into that. What is your nasty one, your gross football, gross teams, whatever, coming up next. So stay tuned for that. But what is your must-see game when it comes to sort of good football and relevance in terms of repercussions for the winner?
Yeah, so it's no shocker here that both involve Clemson, and they're both at Clemson, but I think NC State at Clemson and then Miami at Clemson. I think those are kind of the three teams that are just rise a little bit above kind of the midfield of this conference, and really is going to be a good yardstick to seeing is this Clemson team, just like last year, where they beat the bad teams, but when they played a team that was close to them, it was either they barely came out on top or just lost outright. Those two teams are going to be interesting, like with Miami kind of throwing out a more, like, they're just going to, like, offense explosion, whereas I think NC State's going to play a similar game to them. I like both of those matchups because I think those will probably determine who we're seeing at the end of the year in the ACC conference game. So I think especially circle that NC State at Clemson because I think that determines their entire division.
For sure. And the one I wanted to touch on, quick, I'm not going to do this. I'm known to sort of cheat the rules and find a way around it. But I think we do need to mention Notre Dame playing 4 ACC teams this year. So they're playing UNC on September 24th. They're playing Syracuse October 29th, Clemson November 5th. That one, you could make a sort of gray area in the rules argument for that one, but I'm not going to do that. Then November 19th against Boston College. But that November 5th, Clemson Notre Dame one, a lot of repercussions because, again, ACC, who knows? We could see in the next – because who knows with college football right now? We could see as soon as we release this pod, Notre Dame announces they're joining the ACC or something. So that's not going to happen, knock on wood. But no one knows. That's a really good one. But I got to go with Miami Clemson because, when I look at it, those are, I think, are going to be the teams that are really competing for the conference. I'm again, pretty high on Miami with some nostalgia hopes and whatever else. But I got to go with Miami Clemson for my must-see big game.
Yeah, and if we're going to talk a little out of conference to just circle your calendar, September 17th at Kyle Field in College Station, Miami at A&M. That's just like it's going to be a funky uniform matchup. Like, those are all really weird colors, but just like, if you like to see brands and brands play football, like, that's a great one to see. And I think two programs that are trying to do pretty similar things when it comes to recruiting, playing each other, like, I just think that's like a very fun non-conference game, even though it probably won't decide the fates of either programs this year.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if there's a metric for it, but could that be the highest paid college football game of the year? Could that be the game where there's the most NIL money on both sides combined? Potentially.
It has to be.
I don't know, but yeah.
It has to be. Tennessee fans in the chat might be a little bit mad because I know they love to brag about how much they'll pay their guys, but I think, like, when you think of NIL bag droppers, the two this year that have been just, like, relentless, like, Tennessee and some of those other programs, they'll throw a bag at one guy to get them there, but, like, they've just been relentlessly, like, not blank check, but giving them base salaries to just come and play for the respective organizations.
Yeah, for sure. That's in Miami as well. So With that out of the way, here's the exciting one, the juicy one. What is your? We're calling it a sickos game. What is your? Could have a juicy line, or it could just be entertaining to watch. It could just be like, you know, watching two drunk monkeys brawling over I don't even know, a banana, whatever, whatever. They should have written down my analogies here. But what is your nasty game? What is your in the mud, just garbage football? But it can't help but be. What's your fast food of games? Since we just talked about the high class food, what's your fast food? Can't resist that craving. Got to see this game.
It's Duke at Georgia Tech. Like, this game's gonna be so gross. Like, I was just looking at it, like, Duke, they're both gonna be abysmal programs, and Duke is probably gonna lose to Kansas this year. Like, they play each other, and I think Kansas is gonna beat Duke. That's how bad I think Duke is. And then Georgia Tech, just, they were the original Scrappy Dogs. That's how we got the Scrappy Dog moniker, was Georgia Tech kept on covering the spread, but last year, 3-9. Horrible, horrible display of just like, they can be scrappy, but they just never add wins, which is like a problem at the end of the day. And ever since Paul Johnson retired and they went away from the triple option, it's just been bad. Like, it's been bad. Like, the transition, they had one guy, what's his name? I always forget. Jamar Gibbs, who's now at Alabama, like, was one of the top transfers this year. They lost him, and that was like their only offense to get him to 3 wins last year, and God help them, they have nobody else behind him, so it's going to be bad. Like, it's gonna be, and not to spoil some win totals, but I would be slamming the unders on both of those schools, because it's just, they're gonna be abysmal programs this year. They could easily both have 1 and 2 losses apiece, or 2 wins apiece by the end of the year.
For sure. And stay tuned this pod as we dive into win totals to sort of wrap us up. But for me, I got to call myself out. If you guys watch, and I encourage you to watch on YouTube, we stream live and then they're available on YouTube, our weekend spread, especially. I make signs throughout the season. So I got to throw up the Sonic the Hedgehog, call myself out for sort of hedging here. But the Sonic the Hedgehog sign is up. Got to go fast. But I'm going to hedge. So my must-see good game was based on Miami being good, but I'm going to hedge that because it's Miami, and we've heard this so many times. So my must-see nasty game is going to include a scenario where Miami is disappointing, and that is, it clicked out of my notes here. That is Miami at Pitt. It is Saturday, November 26th, the last week of the ACC before the ACC championship. So I'm almost basing this on maybe Miami being not necessarily super disappointing, but underperforming. Obviously, they picked Clemson the week before on the 19th. So, maybe they drop that game and then they have to win this one for a rematch because Pitt is performing well and whatever else. But I just think that there's a really high potential for people to get really high on Miami and then Miami to underperform really high expectations, but to do well, like we talked about, that 8-4 goal I think is really good for this Miami team. I could easily see him being a 6-6 team. Unfortunately, because that's just that's how it is with a new everything coming in, especially when there's a lot of pressure and not a lot of time and all sorts of external factors. So who knows? But I really think that this Miami Pitt game, because those are sort of the two wild card teams that are on the upper end. Obviously, anyone can upset anyone, but I'm kind of betting on that sort of Pitt super weapon that we like to talk about. Pitt being disappointing, but still having upset potential against people. And then Miami, maybe in a scenario where they're fighting for their life, could potentially make it to the championship, or maybe they're fighting for a bowl game there. I just think that they're two very equally matched teams. And who knows? But I like that one. But I got to say, Blake, yours was, I don't think there's going to be a nastier one than
it's
the
gonna
one
be
that
gross.
you brought up. Yeah.
And it's probably gonna show up on the weekend spread. Like, whenever that week comes around, somebody's gonna choose it as their wild card game. Like, these are potential. Like, they are gonna be bottom of the barrel P5 conference. Like, it's gonna be bad.
For sure. So now that we've discussed sort of winning the conference, to wrap us up, let's dive into what are we feeling on win totals over and unders. We're not going to go through all of them, but I do think we need to touch on Clemson specifically and maybe Miami specifically, and then UNC, some of the top guys, and then just anything else that jumps out at us. So Blake, I'll let you take it. I know you have some good notes on this.
Yeah, so there's a few that I highlighted, spoiled two already. Duke, over under 3. If you can find a 3.5, if it ever moves, slam it under. Like, looking at their schedules, first off for Duke, their non-conference is Temple, Northwestern, North Carolina A&T, and Kansas. And I think out of all those, the only guaranteed one is North Carolina A&T. I think Temple, they're bad, but we'll give them, like, it's just like two bad teams going up against one another. Like, anything could happen. Northwestern, I think, is a better coach team. And then Kansas, returning a lot of talent, gave a lot of people the Big 12 fits. Like, I think they're kind of on the up and up in Kansas terms. So you're basically only getting one before going into conference play. And then after that, you really only have a legitimate chance to beat Georgia Tech. So I can't see, at best I can see 3 wins you push. But that's the best I see for that program. And then Georgia Tech, you look at their schedule, and my oh my, how is this team? How is it 3.5 wins? How? They open up with Clemson. That is an L. They decide to play Western Carolina, good FCS. There you go. Like, you get a win there. Then they play Ole Miss. Loss. Then they decide not to go P5. They go Group of 5 and decide to play UCF. Loss. Like, what is the scheduling going on for Georgia Tech? And then you go into conference, and you're only, kind of like I said with Duke, your only probably win is going to be Duke, and so you're only getting 2 wins there, and with 3.5, there's no way they string together 4. Like, even if they're competitive, there's no way they string together 4, considering all these other teams, kind of like, that they play against are, they're not the doldrums of the ACC, but they float around the middle. And remember, Georgia Tech has a rivalry game versus Georgia. And so they are definitely not beating Georgia, and it's at Georgia this year. So those were 2 of the big unders that I saw. And then, no surprise here, just like I've been slamming with conference futures, but give me NC State over 8.5 wins. Like, that is 9-3 last year. They already did it once. I think they could do it again. And as Ty said earlier, like, they have a really favorable schedule that going into Clemson on October 1st, they could be 4-0. And really, besides that, they avoid Miami. They avoid Pitt from the other division, which are kind of like your 2 thorns in your side. If you're like looking at their schedule, they avoid those 2 teams. So I think they're favored in most games, probably every single game besides Clemson and maybe North Carolina, depending on how they do. But I like North Carolina's state schedule because basically every good team they play besides Clemson, they're playing at home.
For sure. The big thing that jumps out to me when I look at these win totals, again, courtesy of DraftKings, is they all seem very, very high right now. It to the point where obviously I'd have to sit down and crunch the numbers, but it seems like it's just straight up not even mathematically possible for even half of these to occur because so many teams are at 8.5, 7.5, 6.5 even, that it's rough. But Clemson, 10.5, I don't know. Because again, ACC, who knows? But Miami also 8.5, so they got to have 9 wins to hit that over. I don't know on that one. And then even UNC 7.5. God, it still seems they all seem sort of 1 too high for me. But I guess that's the point. So I really, when I look at one that jumps out, I gotta do the sickos thing and go with the Kansas of the ACC. I gotta say, maybe something crazy happens and Duke hits 3.
No, stop. They're going to be even worse than Georgia Tech. Like, there's no way. There's no way. Looking at their schedule, there is I wouldn't say bet my life on it, but pretty dang close that they do not win 4 games. There is no ways. At best you get a push here.
I don't know. Let me pull up their schedule real quick, but I've been known to just be burned year after year by taking the Kansas over 2 wins or over 4 wins or whatever. So they won their spring game, which is good. That's a good start to the season. Doesn't count towards the win total, but that they got some momentum there. Temple, I don't know anything about Temple, but I'm going to assume win maybe. Northwestern, that's probably a loss. North Carolina A&T, I'll give them the win. Kansas, I'll give them the win there. And then Georgia Tech, yeah, I feel like it's all there without having to do anything crazy. So
That
Duke,
means,
super weapon. Uh, you're just betting against them because you don't like Coach K.
yeah, he's not there anymore. Thank God.
Well, he might be in the stands. So yeah, but I really don't. When I look at the win totals, I like a if I were to put real money on if I had to put real money on every single one of these win totals, I'd probably be taking the under on most of them. All joking aside, even that Duke one, I think that's an under. The Clemson one, I think the safe bet is the under. 11 wins is just a lot for a
That's a
team that
lot.
lost its defensive coordinator. Its quarterback has been disappointing. They're seeing a lot of turnover that they're not used to, which is a big thing.
And they have to
Um,
play Notre Dame and NC State, and just like they
yeah,
generally will lose one game in conference, and then you
yeah.
have to play Notre Dame.
So maybe you know what? Mentioning that, I think I glossed over this. Maybe that NC State 9 wins because they're at 8.5 according to the numbers I have on DraftKings. NC State to win 9 games, I feel like could be the safe. That's probably one of the only ones I would take the over on.
Yeah, they like the ACC. I think like this year it's gonna be a big 6-6 conference. Like turn out a lot of bowl teams, but like not really like there's probably like a very few elite teams, and then the rest are like
Yeah,
6-6 or nothing. Like I just think it's gonna be a lot of those. Like they have a lot of feisty teams. Like we didn't talk about some of them, but like Syracuse is gonna be really feisty this year. Phil Dracovic coming back for Boston College, he's gonna be a great quarterback. Like they're always gonna be good. Florida State has that history, has the recruits. They're gonna be like, and you see like with these win totals, they're all putting them around 6.5 because they're gonna be 6-6, 7-5 teams, but they're gonna be really scrappy at those records. So this is just gonna be a really like if you love to bet conference futures and win totals, like this is gonna be a good one because there's really not like any for sure games besides a few like if it's a Clemson or one of those teams, but a lot of coin flips. But that's what makes this conference fun. So
for sure. As we start to sort of wrap up here, I think that's a good point. If I had to summarize the ACC next season in 3 phrases, it would be again, repeating themes. First off, who knows? Because we don't know. There could be a team like Clemson who could shock us and come out and be a playoff contender, or they could be a 4 loss team and maybe even more. We just don't know right now. There's so many factors at play. The second one, I think it's going to be an extremely internally competitive conference. Like you said, it's not going to be national relevance. I don't think a whole lot of these games are going to be making waves nationally and changing how things go. But if you're a fan of an ACC team, I think you're going to be on the edge of your seat most weekends. And some people don't want that. Obviously, there's a lot of fans that are like, God, I wish I was Bama and we were just sweeping people and I didn't have to stress over it and I could order my national champion shirt, a year in advance or whatever else. But for a non ACC fan, if you're not associated with any one of these teams like we are, that's really good news because we got some really interesting games. And the third point, I think there's going to be some really, really juicy as we continue to roll into the weekend spread. I think there's going to be some really juicy gambling within the ACC, probably more so than any other Power Five conference. I'm going to call it right now, and that's predicated on this assumption that they're going to be really internally competitive. I think we're going to see, hopefully, fingers crossed. I think we're going to see a lot of really, really razor thin lines and over unders and all sorts of stuff that are going to be really competitive. I think there's going to be a lot of money made, a lot of money lost when we start to look at gambling within the ACC next season.
Couldn't have said it any better, Ty.
All right. So with that, now Commodore Boatin Blake, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, just great talking some ACC football, and look forward to next week, as I believe next week is the G5 conferences, my favorite ones to talk about. Bobby and I will be talking some Fun Belt, some MAC, some Mountain West, some AAC maybe a little bit. That one's not as fun to talk about, but the big ones, the ones that always are featured on our wild card, we are going to get you informed, and it's going to be a must-listen episode because I know most listeners don't know what the hell is going on in the Mountain West right now. So,
for sure. The group of five, it's, you never know. Shout out to my Boko the Bobcat at Texas State, the only worthwhile group of five team. But with that, I want to say thank you to all of our fans and all of our listeners. Again, we have a lot of exciting content for the season coming up with the regular Schooner Pod and then various offshoots of that. And then, of course, the weekend spread with Commodore Boatin Blake. He comes and joins Bobby and Jameson and I. We break down gambling within the Big 12, all the lines, all the odds, all the juicy stuff. And, we might not have the best picks, but we'll at least bring the games up so you can do your own research or look into your own stuff. Again, when you're gambling, if you gamble, seek help if you need it, but we recommend our wonderful sponsors at DraftKings. And if you want to support the Schooner Pod and the Weekend Spread, please like and subscribe on wherever you listen to us on podcasts. Consider tuning in live on YouTube when you can, or watching and liking and subscribing on YouTube. And we would really appreciate that. And please don't hesitate to hit us up in the comments on any of our stuff and let us know what you want to see more of. So with that, Commodore Boatin Blake, thank you for joining us, and that's going to be all for tonight. I look forward to seeing all of you all next week on the Group of Five, and then as next week's Schooner Pod as well. And then as we roll into this super exciting season, one of the most exciting seasons of college football in terms of storylines and everything else. So tune in to college football and college football content while you can, because I think the sport's going to be dead in about 3 years when we just have a mini NFL. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. And that'll be it for Commodore Boatin Blake and I.